What's up everyone, Zik here. In this video, we're going to take a look at an endgame chain lightning build for Sorcerer in Season 5. I've been playing only chain lightning so far this season because of how fun and powerful it's felt, and I was really trying to get something like this to work last season, and it just didn't. But now, Axial Conduit completely changes the way chain lightning works and makes it way more interesting to play. We're pairing this with the improved Esadora's overflowing Cameo to get maximum lightning explosions. So this build I'm about to share with you is the evolution of what I learned from last season combined with the chain lightning build I just leveled with this season, and I shared that in my previous video, so if you're looking for a powerful leveling build before 100 that transitions nicely into this build in Endgame, I would start there. Alright, before we go deep, I want to give you guys a really accurate idea of the power of this build so you can know if it's right for you. I haven't had the time to farm this items yet, and I probably won't for at least like another week, so rather than delay the video, I decided to just share the idea with you guys now and show what it's capable of with just average gear. Right now, all my gear is at Masterwork 8, which is really easy to farm now, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. And my uniques especially are not great. If you can find max rolls on the lightning explosion effects for Axial Conduit and Esadora's, which is a huge chunk of our total damage, that's what's really going to make this build pop off. You can see I don't even have 925 conduits yet, and the unique effect is about 4,000 lower than the max roll on 925s, and my Esadora is still missing a full third of the possible explosion damage. My point to all this is that the ceiling for this build with good gear fully masterworked is much higher than what I'm able to show here. With my gear as it is right now, I'm able to crush every tormented boss, including Duriel and Andariel, easily farm pit tier 100 in about 5 minutes, and quickly farm hundreds of shards in tier 6 infernal hordes, with my max being close to 600 in a single run. I haven't done a ton of limit testing because it feels kind of pointless without better gear, but I'm basically right on the edge of being able to clear tier 7 right now. I can kill stuff in there, but by the 3rd or 4th wave, I don't have quite enough damage to keep up with the amount of mobs spawning. With simply max rolls on the lightning explosion effects for Axial and Esadora's, I could easily clear tier 7. And with everything masterworked all the way up to 12, we're going to be right there in tier 8. This build doesn't require any uber uniques, and in fact is a great build to farm for them. But I do think the final version could be enhanced by a couple ubers, and we will discuss that in the gear section. I'm going to be messing with a bunch of different builds this season, and my aim is to bring you guys creative and novel build ideas that open up new and fun ways to play Sorcerer. My hope is that we can all carry these build ideas into the expansion in a few months and continue to expand on them to make our class much more exciting. This build, however, is sort of my passion project and the one I really want to make work at a high level this season, so I'm going to continue trying to obtain the best gear for it, and once I am fully BIS, I may make another video to showcase the top end power. So if you want to follow the progression of this build or see some other cool Sorcerer builds this season, be sure to subscribe. And if you end up playing this build, I would love to hear about your experience in the comments. That's literally why I make these videos. Now, introducing Esadora's Conduit. The unique power combo that makes this build work is the synergy between Axial Conduit and Esadora's overflowing Cameo. Both of these uniques give you a new lightning explosion effect that scales very well when compared to our other lightning damage. Axial Conduit basically turns you into a battery for chain lightning. Now when you cast chain lightning, it will behave half like chain lightning, half like ball lightning. For half the time, it will seek out enemies and zap them, and for the other half, it will return and orbit you like ball lightning. When a bolt of lightning returns to you, it will drain mana based on the amount of chain lightning spells currently active, which you can see indicated by the little number down here on your hotbar. When a bolt of chain lightning drains 66 total mana in this way, it will explode, causing big AoE lightning damage. Now because we are running destructive chain lightning, everything we hit is going to have a chance to drop Crackling energy. We are going to use this massive surplus of Crackling energy not only to generate mana for our lightning battery, but also to trigger additional lightning explosions from Esadora's overflowing Cameo. Esadora's makes it so whenever you absorb a Crackling energy, you have a 15% chance to release a lightning nova around yourself, and this damage scales with our intelligence. On top of that, we are running Enchanted Lightning Spear, so 1 out of every 10 Crackling energies you grab will automatically spawn a Spear of Lightning. We are pairing that with Enchanted Ice Blades for big cooldown reduction, and leveraging Conjuration Mastery to massively scale our damage, mana regen, and move speed, all of which are very important for this build. Speaking of move speed, the final unique to bring it all together is Esu's Heirloom. These are extremely strong boots for any crit focused build, and are going to let us approach the 100% crit cap. especially when stacked with the increased movement speed from Conjuration Mastery and increased movement speed from absorbing Crackling Energy with Esadoras, both of which will now scale our crit chance as well with Esus. The way this build plays is interesting, and I think part of the reason I like it so much is how different it feels from a lot of other builds. You don't really have to aim with this build. Chain Lightning will kind of just do its own thing and seek out enemies even if you shoot it the wrong way. Much more important than aiming are movement and positioning. You're constantly trying to move over Crackling Energy to proc explosions, gain Lightning Spears, and generate mana. You're also trying to position close to big elites and bosses whenever possible to maximize the damage of your rotating Chain Lightning. What this looks like in practice is essentially casting Chain Lightning once, then moving through Crackling Energy during the slight downtime from casting, then casting Chain Lightning again, then moving a bit again, and so on. It feels a bit like orb walking as an ADC in League. Once you have everything online, you're going to have basically unlimited mana, but only if you're continuously collecting Crackling Energy. If you stand there in one spot and spam Chain Lightning, you're going to go and it's going to be a big DPS loss because you're not getting the continuous explosions, mana, and Lightning Spears that come from picking up the Crackling Energy. So if you prefer strategic movement and like dodging in and out of big groups to maximize DPS, I think you'll really enjoy the feel of this build. The core idea behind Axial Conduit is to use as much mana as you can without ever going fully If your mana hits 0 at any point, all your active Chain Lightnings disappear without exploding, which results in a significant DPS loss. Once you get fully built, you're going to have a massive amount of mana generation and regeneration, as well as over 200 base mana without any max resource affixes. At this point, you'll find it's actually pretty challenging to go fully especially when fighting big groups of mobs. The main situation where you'll have to worry about it is if you're kiting away, since you're not getting any of the Crackling Energy that is spawning under the mobs you're moving away from. As long as you're pathing through your Crackling Energy spawns between each Chain Lightning, your mana will be unlimited. Whenever it's safe to dodge, we want to weave that in to add the extra move speed and thus additional crit chance from Esus. With Enchanted Ice Blades, we're trying to use our cooldowns as much as possible, because using cooldowns generates free Ice Blades, and every attack from Ice Blades lowers the cooldown of all of our abilities. More cooldowns used equals more Ice Blades spawned equals more cooldown reduction equals more cooldowns used, and this is the positive feedback loop that makes Ice Blades one of our best spells in the game. Also keep in mind that every time you teleport, for 3 seconds after, you will have 30% increased damage reduction and 30% increased move speed, which will additionally scale your crit chance from Esus. Use Flame Shield early and often for big offensive stuns and to reposition for max damage. The main time you should hold Flame Shield to save yourself is if your Flame Shield enchantment from Firebird, which we'll talk about in a second, has already procced, in which case you want to play a bit more cautious until that is off cooldown. With this build, we're stacking as much damage reduction as possible, and building health wherever we can. But since Esadora's damage scales off max intelligence, and has an intelligence multiplier built in as an affix, intelligence has to take prio over health, especially for gems. This leaves us with not a very big health pool, but we are offsetting that by maxing out damage reduction and having constant barrier generation. With the Shimmering Ice Armor upgrade and the amount of mana we are spending combined with Enchanted Ice Blades, Ice Armor will have 100% uptime unless it gets damaged off. There is also a ton of extra damage reduction that I don't have yet if you can get Esadoras with a greater affix on the Crackling Energy damage reduction, which without any masterworking gives you 3% damage reduction per stack. That will give you 36% extra damage reduction when you have full Crackling Energy as a baseline, and will only go up from there. If you were able to hit this with multiple masterworking crits, it would be insane. A greater affix for the damage reduction roll on Axial Conduit would be very good as well, and both of those together would more than double the amount of damage reduction I'm currently getting from those two items. Originally, I was running Mage Lord's Aspect on chest for the extra damage reduction we get with Fear's Mastery, but it didn't feel like it was doing much and I was still getting one-shot sometimes. So I decided to try out this new Firebird aspect on chest, and holy shit is it cool, since Flame Shield enchantment actually works now. This aspect basically serves as one-shot protection, and it actually activates now when you're about to receive fatal damage. My least favorite part of playing Sorcerer in this game is getting randomly one-shot from something I couldn't see in the middle of the bajillion things happening on my screen. This aspect feels like it's sort of solved that. Now, the only time I get one-tapped is if it happens more than once in 30 seconds, which is much less often. So we are basically giving up a bit of extra damage reduction, which we're using to not get one-shot anyways, to instead give ourselves complete and guaranteed one-shot protection every 30 seconds. I was also experimenting with Soulbrand and Snow Veiled Aspect here, both of which have some potential viability, so if you prefer just stacking damage reduction, I think those or Mage Lords can definitely work. Alright, now let's take a closer look at our aspects in gear. Like I mentioned previously, intelligence is extremely important with this build, and that is for a couple of reasons. Number one, intelligence scales the damage of all of our skills, and this is an independent bucket in the damage equation. So the bigger this number, the more sort of multiplicative power it's going to have against all the other multipliers you have. All your glyphs, all your aspects that have multipliers are getting multiplied against this number. So the larger it is, the more it's going to amplify those other multipliers. Another thing this does for us is completely take care of our resistances. And you can see we're going to be way over the resistance cap for everything very easily. And I'm honestly like super frustrated with how many rolls I see on Sorcerer gear this season that have like shadow resist or fire resist or any kind of resistance roll like that is completely useless for Sorcerer. It has been the whole game. And so the fact that I get double greater affix rolls and half the time one of those greater affixes is some 60% resistance that I don't need at all. Like, why that's even rolling on our gear, I have no idea. Like, that just feels like they're trolling us with bad gear, you know, to make better gear feel more exciting or whatever. Anyways, I digress. Intelligence, really strong with this build. So the other reason is it's going to scale the damage of our Esadora's overflowing Cameo explosions. You can see here, upon collecting Crackling energy, there's a 15% chance to release a lightning nova, dealing X damage increased by 60%. Multiplicative for every 100 intelligence you have. So my current bonus based on my 2,432 intelligence is right down here, 1,440%. So that's a big multiplier, and you can essentially, the more intelligence you stack, the more powerful that multiplier becomes. And again, that's getting multiplied against all your other multiplicative damage modifiers, your glyphs, your aspects that are multiplicative, right? So we are trying to get intelligence literally anywhere we can roll it. And if we can get a piece with a greater affix intelligence, that's even better. And then if you can dink that with a couple masterworking crits, that's even better. Because this build, the top end damage is going to continue to scale off of maxing out your intelligence. So if there was one stat you had to pick to just go balls to the wall on, it would be int. You can see I have int rolls on most of the pieces where I can get it, and the ones that I have a greater affix, and if you can hit those with the masterworking crits, it makes it even better. All right, so secondary to intelligence is going to be max health, just so we can live and not get completely one-shot by everything. And we don't have a ton of spots to pick that up, like, because we're running 4 uniques. So Talrasha's is the one I didn't mention at the beginning, but we'll get to that. It's not quite as important. We're basically just using it for the big multiplier. But you can see I'm trying to get max health where I can get it. And I'm missing it on a couple of pieces. I'm missing it on a helmet and gloves, but we're going to get there in a second because there's a couple other things you need. But I try to grab it on this ring, try to grab it on, you know, my offhand, and try to grab it on my main hand. And again, like the best would be if you could find greater affix intelligence max life for your main hand, offhand, ring, and chest. I think it's going to be really strong. Okay, so next stat we just want to make sure we're covered on is armor. And because our resistance is so high with how much intelligence we have, we don't have to worry about diamonds at all in our jewelry. So we can just run full skulls. And the trick to armor is basically the easiest way is finding a piece of gear with an armor roll like my helmet, and then rolling the temper for percent total armor with that. And then that combined with skulls in your jewelry is going to pretty quickly bring you above the 9,230 armor cap. And so every build at max level, you just want to make sure your armor and resistances are covered like that, right? And if you're looking, you know, a little deeper into endgame, you might want to try to get this armor roll on one of these 2 pieces, on your chest or on your gloves. And the reason I say that is because your helm may eventually be Shaco. And that doesn't have any armor on it, but it's a completely insane item, best item in the game. So if you're planning to farm for that with this build, that's going to replace your helmet, and you're going to have to find a new armor roll. Like, I'm going to have to find a new piece for one of these 2 with an armor roll on it. So on my chest, you want the int and max life, right? On my gloves, I'm missing max life. So if I could, I actually might try to re-roll it, because I don't think I need this lucky hit restore primary resource. The couple of fixes that you really want to have somewhere is this mana per second. You just need 1 mana per second roll anywhere that you can get it, right? That's going to make a huge difference in the way your mana battery feels. I don't think this lucky hit restore primary resource is a must. I should honestly probably try to re-roll that to health with enchanting, because I think Bisque gloves are going to be intelligence, max HP, or crit chance, depending, and then chain lightning. So we are running ever living aspect on our helmet, and this is just for the extra damage reduction, which is pretty much always going to be up because we're going to have really high vulnerability. And when you eventually get Shaco, that's basically has the same aspect built into it. It just has like 20% damage reduction or whatever it is. So you know, you're not going to feel a real change there, and you're going to get all the other juice from the Harlequin's Crest, right? For chest piece, I think this is pretty close to Bis. I think int max life, like we talked about. And then for the third affix, looking at something like defensive skills is a really good one. Again, you could get armor here. Like, I think ideally I would want my armor roll to be right where this +3 defensive skills is. And then I would want this lucky hit to be crit chance. And I think that would be pretty close to like absolute Bis for affix rolls. I forgot to mention the second temper on our helmet, which is going to be stun duration. And so this combo of secondary tempers between these three, stun duration, lucky hit chance to stun, and lucky hit chance to freeze. So those three together, I think, feel really good with this build. You're getting a bunch of stuns from the lightning stuff in your skill tree, so you stack that with this one lucky hit roll to stun, combined with 30% stun duration. You're also getting a big stun on your flame shield. That's just going to buy you more time to pump DPS without stuff attacking you. And then besides the lucky hit chance to stun here, the other tempo we're going for is just more max life. We're just trying to squeeze any extra max life we can with the slots we have available for it, right? And then this is what I talked about earlier, where I was trying a couple different aspects here. I even tried Soul Brand, the unique, which actually didn't feel that bad, to be honest. But instead of going for damage reduction through, you know, Snow Veiled Aspect or Soul Brand, or I was trying Mage Lords here, I tried this Firebird, and it's awesome, man. It literally just saves you from getting one-shot, and it actually works now. And I don't know, that's literally my least favorite part about playing Sorcerer in this game. It's so frustrating when you're like just jamming out, like having a really good time, and then just like out of nowhere you're like fully healed and shielded, and just like out of nowhere you just get one tapped, and you're like, what just happened? So this basically protects you from that every 30 seconds. So if that happens, if you see your flame shield go off and you didn't activate it, just know that you might want to play a little more tactical for the next 30 seconds and maybe hold your actual flame shield ability for when you needed to save yourself, because you're not going to have that, you know, flame shield coming up automatically for another 30 seconds. For gloves, we already talked about it a bit, but I think Bis would be intelligence, crit chance, and ranks to chain lightning. And for the other temper besides the freeze we talked about, I really like this shock critical strike chance. And I think for this freeze one, you could go with stun as well. I was messing around with trying some points in the freeze multiplier in the skill tree. You know, I think this, you know, being lucky at chance to stun would basically just, you know, be doubling whatever this one is. And I think that could be really good too, because we have a bunch of synergy with stun, and you get the extra damage on stun from the skill tree and stuff. But I don't know, for some reason, the freeze combined with the stun feels like it gives me more crowd control. Like, I don't know if there's some DR or something like that that's shared on stuns and not shared with freeze, but this combo, stun duration, lucky hit to stun, lucky hit to freeze, has just felt the best out of the ones I've tried. All right, let's just finish talking about the normal pieces of gear, and then we'll get to the uniques. So for the one ring you're going to use, you really want intelligence max life. Again, GA on both of those, if you get it, would just be POG, right? And then for this third roll, there's a couple options that could work really good. Crit chance, lucky hit chance, etc. The one thing is you want to make sure you're not pushing over the 100% crit cap, because remember, you can't crit more than 100% of the time. If you have a 100% crit chance, that means you're critting every time, and it can't go over that. And so you want to be basically, and you have a couple things that are passively increasing it, like your Esus as you're fighting. So it's going to be scaling up. You can see like, it says the bonus here, but like 9.2 bonus from the crit on Esus, but we can look at my crit chance here, and we can see it jump. And it's higher than this because I have some shock critical strike chance rolls. It's like 10% higher than that. But when I dodge, it's at 55, so it's going to be at 65 with my shock when I'm... And then that's also getting increased by the stuff we talked about in Conjuration Mastery is scaling it. And then the Crackling energy grabbing move speed from this is scaling it. So we have a lot of stuff scaling our move speed. And that's going to scale our crit chance even higher, like during combat, that you can't necessarily see in this window. But just make sure, I think it would be challenging to get to 100% crit. And honestly, you could probably try to roll crit in every slot and still not quite be there. So kind of a mute point. So I think the third affix here, lucky hit chance is good, crit chance is good. And then for the aspect, we are using recharging aspect. And this just, I've tried different things here, and nothing feels even close to the amount of mana this gives us because of how often our chain lightnings are bouncing. And so this aspect is a huge part of our mana generation and like our mana battery chain lightning thing we got going on. And I might, we'll see. There might be a case where you could replace this with Starless if you got it, the uber unique Starless Skies that has the reduced mana cost, and that might sort of replace this aspect or give us what we're looking for as far as mana goes out of this aspect. And that would be dope because then you get a damage multiplier with it. And so that's one of those are kind of the two Ubers I'm looking at maybe for like end game, pinnacle of this build would be Ring of Starless Skies here and Shaco here, right? Harlequin's Crest. For tempers, I tried a bunch of different stuff. I tried Invigorating Conduit because you'd think that would be good, but we already have skill points in our skill tree, right? Which is the thing that gives you mana when you pick up Crackling Energy. So let's say you had a Invigorating Conduit roll on your ring, which is what I was trying first, and so this had 3 more ranks, so it's 24 mana. That basically just feels like it makes me go over 100 mana and doesn't give me like I'm looking for like continuous generation, like constantly want it filling back up no matter what's going on. And this just made it like feel more dependent on Crackling Energy than it already is, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. I was looking at the Conduit pants, and it has this resource generation and maximum roll. And that literally scales this resource generation on your ring. And resource generation, if you look at the stats, gaining mana from any source grants this % more mana than normal. So this effect, it only works when you go out of town for some reason. It's super weird. But this resource generation and maximum, the 40%, scales this 14% here by 40%. So 10% of 14% is 1.4. Just move the decimal over. So basically 1.5. So 4 of those would be, 6? So this is going to be, this roll is actually 20% because it's being scaled by my Axial Conduit pants. And that is going to make it so mana from any source, including Invigorating Conduit, where we're grabbing our Crackling Energies, is going to be increased by that percentage. So it's going to be increased by 40% and then another 14% increased by 40%. So let's just go out and look at it. So as soon as I get out here, we can see my mana generation is 60%. So what that means is anytime I'm getting mana from any source, like Invigorating Conduit or, this Lucky Hit Restore Primary Resource, or anything that's giving you mana, it's scaled by that amount. So for example, Invigorating Conduit, right? It's giving us 12 mana. So 60% of 12, we know that 10% is 1.2. So 6 of those would be, what is that? Like 7.2? So we're actually getting a little over 19 mana for every Crackling Energy we grab. So really similar to, looking for the Invigorating Conduit rolls, but it's also scaling the mana we get from every other source. And in practice, that just felt way better to me. So I really like, I know that was a long-winded point, but I really like this resource generation roll on Ring. And then secondary roll on Ring is going to be this Shock Critical Strike chance. And honestly, for a couple of these, so your Ring, your offhand, and your main hand, and your gloves, which I missed, sorry. For that second roll, we are just going to do the Shock Finesse, and you just want to hit it on a couple different things. Shock Critical Strike chance is going to be the best, I think. But secondary to that, that's also strong, is going to be Shock Critical Strike damage and lightning damage. And the ones that you don't want are teleport damage or Crackling Energy damage, because they only affect one tiny parts of your damage that aren't going to do much. So you can see on gloves, I have Shock Critical Strike chance. On ring, I have Shock Critical Strike chance. On offhand, I have lightning damage. And on main hand, I have Shock Critical Strike damage. So some mix of those leaning into the crit is, I think, the way to go. Forgot to mention, on gloves, you're going to want Shredding Blades. This is just, again, for high vulnerability with Ice Blades. We're going to have Ice Blades up all over the place because we're running Enchanted Ice Blades. Extra 30% multiplier there. Easy. For our offhand, again, pretty simple. The same stuff we already talked about. Intelligence, Max Life as the main two, and then Crit Strike chance. Other good things could work here. Cooldown reduction could be good. You'll notice my second temper on here is Ice Blades. And you're like, why is that not Chain Lightning? I think where I'm at now, this would probably be better as Chain Lightning. However, especially like before your build is fully built out, and if you're not using this Elixir of Resourcefulness, so there's two things, Elixir of Resourcefulness and the Unleash Glyph, we have slotted in here, are going to do huge amounts for your continuous mana regeneration. So if you have those two things active, then I think you could get a Chain Lightning roll here, and it would be better. But the reason I was trying Ice Blades is I was finding I was going from double casting Chain Lightning. But like I just said, when everything's fully online, you're going to probably want this to be Chain Lightning instead of Ice Blades. I was messing around with the double Ice Blades to see if I could basically get 100% Ice Blades, so every Ice Blades would give me 2. I think that could be a really interesting, like, more defensive look for this build, where we're going to get a lot more CDR from the Ice Blades enchantment, right? But in the end, I think the double cast on Chain Lightning, especially paired with the Conduits, when you have your mana generation fully online with the final build, is going to deliver higher DPS, so that's probably going to be the way to go. For our aspect here, we are just running Conceited because we're always going to have a barrier online. We can have 100% uptime on Ice Armor. Every other cooldown is giving us a barrier from our good little passive that we're always running. Protection. Yeah, we have good barrier generation, and so we're just going to basically have a free 25 multiplier active all the time from Conceited. And then for our main hand, same thing, Intelligence, Max Life. And this is another role that, it's like a preference thing. I really like at least one life on hit somewhere. And what that does for you is makes it so, like, if some little bit of damage, like, gets through your barriers, you don't have to worry about, like, pressing Healing Potion to, like, top off to make sure you don't get one-shot. Because you kind of, like, as a sorcerer, you want to always be at max life. Like, if you're not at max life, you're at risk of getting one-shot at any point by anything, basically. We're so damn squishy. So keeping your health topped off is important, and if you get a life on hit roll somewhere, especially with how much we're hitting with Chain Lightning with this build, that's just going to automatically happen. So if you take, 30-40% of your health is damaged, like if I take half or more, I'll pot, or if I notice it, I'll pot. A lot of times you don't even, like, notice because so much shit's going on. So, instead of taking some damage through your barrier and now being at 70%, and then the next thing killing you that happens a couple seconds later because you're not at 100%, with life on hit, over the next, like, second or two, it'll automatically fill back up. And then if you take another big hit, maybe you'll live from having that extra %30 health back that you otherwise wouldn't have done if you didn't notice and didn't pot, right? It's just like an extra, like, reinsurance to not get one shot. And that, combined with the Firebird aspect we're running, has really, lowered the amount that I'm just getting, like, one tapped by shit I can't see. Then we talked about the Shock Finesse, either crit chance, critical strike damage, or lightning damage. And then for the weapon temper, we are going with either shadow damage or poison damage on this lucky hit. And that is simply to activate the 4th stack on Telrashas. So that's going to bring this multiplier from 60% with 3 elements to 80% with 4 elements. So you either want this to be shadow or poison, because those are the elements you're missing as a sorcerer. All right, now we'll quickly look at the uniques. We've already talked about these a bunch. I'm just going to basically highlight what I think is the most important thing. So obviously you want them to be 925, not 834 like this. But this max roll on 925s for the Bolt of Lightning Exploding is closer to like 26,000 something. And so that's what you'll be looking for that. That's the most important thing. For your uniques, the most important thing that you can find is max roll on this Lightning Explosion, max roll on this Lightning Explosion. Those are going to do by far the most to scale your damage with this build. Honestly, I think there are good arguments for greater affix being good for any of these affixes. So if you can literally hit any of these with a greater affix, it's going to be solid. I think, damn, if I had to rank them, probably my favorites, even though it's like you always want to get ranks to Chain Lightning because that's like your main pump, and I think, that's going to be a really strong one. I would be really curious to see how well a GA, like, maxed out resource generation and maximum would be, because that just might make you just never run out of mana ever, no matter how hard you're pumping. So that's something I'm interested in messing around with, if I can find pants with a GA on the resource generation. And that's, like I said, going to scale. The higher that is, like, imagine that's 60%, that's going to scale any other resource generation you have by that amount as well. So you could kind of, like, get close to possibly, like, infinite, and maybe that's what you're going to need with Starless here. If you're not getting this Chain Lightning bounce mana, if you have Starless Skies here, you might need this maxed out resource generation with that to kind of maintain the same level as this aspect is giving you. TBD on that. If I had to pick one greater affix, I would take damage reduction because I'm really interested in like pushing higher tier content and like challenging myself and testing, like limit testing the build. And the, one thing that holds me back usually more than damage is like just getting one tapped or dying by something. And yes, we have our one tap protection every 30 seconds, but you're still going to be taking a lot of damage from stuff when you're in like the higher tier hordes. And so once every 30 seconds isn't going to be enough. You still need max life, armor resistance, and as much damage reduction as you get. So probably if I had to order these, I'd take damage reduction first, then chain lightning, then resource generation, then cast chain lightning twice, if we're looking at like greater affix priority order. So then going over to Esadora's, similar thing where I think all these affixes are good, except the Crackling Energy one, damage one is like kind of irrelevant. But if you could get greater affix, Esadora's, like the dream Esadora's you're looking for is a max roll on the Lightning Nova, right? GA on the damage reduction from Crackling Energy Charge, and GA on intelligence percentage. That's going to give you everything you're looking for with this build. It's going to push the damage floor, like the base damage scaling of your lightning explosion. It's going to give you an insane amount of damage reduction when you have full Crackling Energy, which is like very, very often because of how much we're grabbing. And then that percent intelligence roll is going to scale your overall intelligence. So the bigger this number is, the more impactful this percentage becomes, right? So imagine this is like a 20%, let's say it's not masterworked and it's like a 20% increased intelligence roll, right? If I have 1,000 intelligence, that 20% is going to give me 200 extra intelligence, right? But if I have 2,500 intelligence, that 20% is now going to give me, what, 500 intelligence, right? It's going to give you, the bigger this number, the more impactful this percentage becomes. And then also, like I mentioned, the move speed from picking up Crackling Energy is going to help scale the crit chance from your Esus, which is our next unique. And the most important thing on these, again, is the unique affix. And so you really want that to be 40%. I literally haven't seen a 40% roll yet. It's crazy. But if you had to pick GAs here, resistance to all elements matters not at all. Don't worry about that one at all. You don't need that. Critical strike damage is good. Move speed after killing an elite, meh. The one you really want is move speed. So if you could find GA move speed with 40% on Esus, that's like super goated for this build. Tal Rasha, similar thing where really all you need with this ring is the 80% multiplier. Like you want a max roll on the unique effect and then literally doesn't matter. Like obviously cooldown reduction is super good, and like if you had to pick one to GA and like hit with masterworking, it would be that one. I don't think potent warding is really worth shit. Lucky hit chance is good. Non-physical damage is also good, but we're already stacking so much of that it's not going to be super impactful. So GA priority would be like cooldown reduction, then like lucky hit chance, then non-physical, then potent warding doesn't really matter. Boom, that's gear. Woo! Did I miss anything? Something else I want to mention real quick. You have different options for your elixirs, but this elixir of resourcefulness is like crazy good with this build. Because of the same thing. So watch this. When I'm in town, my mana is 119. For whatever reason, like I said earlier, this resource generation and maximum doesn't kick in till you're like out in the world, right? So if I come out here, my mana jumps to 166, okay? If I pop this, I'm going to get an additional 20% resource cost reduction and 25% max resource, which is scaled by this 40% resource generation and maximum. So watch this. Boom. 201 mana. Now, we don't have a single roll on our gear for max mana. Like nowhere are we building max resource. This is literally just from our Axial Conduit combined with that elixir, combined with the 1 point we have here. There are other options, like basically I'll use resourcefulness when I'm really trying to like, bang content. Lucky hit attack speed's decent. So you can like rip these ones when you're doing more casual stuff. This one's not going to do much for you, the barbs and armor, because you're already maxed. And then Fortitude's not going to do a ton for you. Fortitude's usually one of my favorites, but because our max health isn't that high, this doesn't scale it that well. So like, let's see, I have 14 through 40. Again, percentage-based thing, right? It's going to increase that number by 20%. So I'm only jumping to 17,000. I'm only getting like a 3,000 increase from that. Whereas like my Meteor build last season, when we're at like, 30,000 health base, that's going to jump us like, it was giving me like 7,500 or something like that. Because it's percentage based, right? It makes sense. It's based off 20% of 15,000 is going to give you less than 20% of 30,000. That's just easy math. And then if you're really trying to push, I think this Chorus of War is really strong because of the way it scales our crit from Dex and the way it scales our int, and then the way that gets further increased by this int scaling on Esadoras. There's a lot to talk about with gear. We're going to try to just hammer through skills pretty quick here. So let's take a look. We just need 2 points to get to our core skills because we're not using a basic with this build. Obviously, 5 in Chain Lightning, star of the show. That's going to be juiced up by our extra ranks we are getting from our gear. Then we're going Enhanced Chain Lightning, and in my leveling build, we were running Greater Chain Lightning because we were getting Crackling energy from other ways. But with this build, we are getting 100% basically of our Crackling energy from Destructive Chain Lightning. And of all the ways you can get Crackling energy, this gives you by far the most. And so because of the way the build's set up and how much we need Crackling energy to make it work, it is worth dropping this 30% multiplier for excess Crackling energy. And the procs, the lightning spears you're going to get from it, the mana you're going to get from it, and the Esadora lightning explosions you're going to get from it are going to far outweigh an extra 30% on your chain lightning. We're also going 1 in Devastation, and that's going to get that extra scaling from the pants we talked about, and that's going into Elemental Dominance. This is basically going to be active all the time for you. You're almost always going to be above 50 mana once you're fully online and you got all the regeneration rolling. This Potent Warding, isn't actually here. That's just from our Talrashas, and so don't worry about that. And I only have 1 point in each of these, so this extra 3 that you see on them is from that defensive roll I have on my chest. But we're going to do Flame Shield into the Enhanced Radius and the Stun, and because of how much we're built into Stun with this, and we got this shocking impact for scaling stun damage, which I'm honestly not sure how impactful that is, ironically enough, but we'll get to that. This is really useful for mobbing and things like the hordes, like the Infernal Hordes, like this huge Flame Shield 4-second stun, which is increased by our 30% stun duration here, like we were talking about, right? Like, let's see. Yeah, so we can see the 3-second stun goes to 3.88 seconds. So we're getting almost an extra full second from that one roll on our helmet. Then we are going teleport to the damage reduction, and like I mentioned earlier, you're going to get move speed and damage reduction for 3 to 4 seconds after you teleport. So keep that in mind as like kind of a little power window you have every time you TP. Then 3 out of 3 in Glass Cannon hurts, but we need it. And then 1 in Ice Armor down to Shimmering Ice Armor. This is what, combined with Enchanted Ice Blades, is going to basically give us 100% uptime on Mana Shield when we're in combat, because we are spending so much mana with this build. It's just flowing through us like an energy conduit that this is going to be cycling. Whoops, this is going to be cycling a bunch, and you're going to basically have unlimited Ice Armor, which honestly feels really good. 1 in Elemental Attunement just to give us this chance of resetting these. We're hitting stuff so much that because this is only proc every 10 seconds, it's kind of a waste to put more than 1 point into it. And so 1 point's going to do you just fine here. And coming down to our Conjuration tree, we are going 1 in Ice Blades to Summoned Ice Blades for the big CDR. This is basically what you need to make it work with the enchantment. And then Lightning Spear over to Summoned Lightning Spear. And this is basically going to make it so you could try this one. I think this one could be good, but because we actually have Lightning Spear slotted onto our bar, and because it casts 2 now, like this is the change with Lightning Spear, where if you actually cast it, which means casting doesn't include like the one you get from Crackling Energy. That's not considered casting. Like if you run over Crackling Energy and get a Lightning Spear spawn from your enchantment, doesn't count. You only get 1 of them. But if you actually cast it off of your bar, you are going to get a second one, and it's going to increase their crit strike chance by a flat 15%. So you got 2 Lightning Spears coming out with a single cast, and we are going to have 100% activation on this Summon Lightning Spear. So because of the amount of Crackling Energy we're grabbing, every single Lightning Spear we throw out, which is now 2 of them, is going to be 160% multiplier on it. So In my opinion, that's going to give you better damage than this one, but if you're looking to push like higher tier content, especially hordes, just for the extra crowd control, it might be worth to swap to this one. So I think there's definitely a case to jump between these depending on the situation. We have our 3 out of 3 in Conjuration Mastery, super important with this build, does wonders for our scaling because of the amount of Lightning Spears and Ice Blades we're going to get up at once. We're going to get a bunch of big damage multiplier, extra movement speed, which is going to scale our crit from Esus, and big multiplicative mana regeneration that's going to help a shitload. 1 in Lucky Hit, that's our last point. If you wanted to pull 1 and put it somewhere else, I would do it to this one, not super important. And then we are going 1 in Align the Elements and 3 in both of these, which in my opinion are super important. This is just going to help a ton with your survivability, and this is going to feed into our barrier play with Conceited on our offhand and trying to keep Ice Armor up all the time. We're just, because we don't have a ton of max health, we're trying to ride our barriers as much as we can. Mana Shield is also going to be activated 100% of the time because you are churning through 100 mana easily every 5 seconds. Coming down to Mastery, just 1 in Static Discharge to get to the others. This is like, it's going to give you some extra Crackling energy, but it's not going to be anywhere close to what Destructive Chain Lightning is giving you. So we basically need this to get to these two. And I'm honestly not super sure how much damage value this is giving us. I haven't taken a close enough look at it to really see like what percentage of my damage is coming from this stun, but I remember it not being very much. And so if you were looking to experiment with some points, you could try pulling a couple out of here. I would leave at least 1 in there for at least some amount of damage when you stun. But yeah, that's an interesting one. And I've just left it maxed because there's not really anything else that I think would make up for, even if it's a small amount of damage. But yeah, kind of TBD with that one. Invigorating Conduit, however, you need it. So 3 out of 3 for sure. And that's just going to help. It's going to be essential to your mana generation. And then we got 1 in Coursing Currents. And this, like, I think personally, especially if you're building crit, you only ever need 1 point in here. Because especially if you're like getting towards the crit cap chance anyways, this isn't going to do a ton for you. Just 1 to get to these 2. And I was running this one at first. So like you could think about maybe dropping these 3, putting them into here, and then using that move speed to position better. And then also that move speed is going to scale your crit from Esus a little bit more, give you a couple extra crit percentage. So that's something that's worth experimenting with. But what is essential is Convulsions, 3 out of 3, and this is going to make it so you have a lot of like built-in crowd control to your Chain Lightning. So your Chain Lightning that's flying around, zapping everything, this is going to give it the effect, the ability to stun on its own. And that combined with the Lucky Hit stun we have on chest and the stun duration we have on head is going to be really solid to just keep stuff off of us while we're trying to blast it. And then again with the damage reduction stack, taking max electrocution, getting an extra 18% on here, and that's going to be basically active all the time because we are critting everything we're hitting pretty much. And then finally, I love the changes they made to this personally. Like, it actually feels like a real aspect now instead of some weird bugged aspect that you ran with Frozen Orb because it was fucked up and worked for all damage instead of just lightning damage. When you critically strike an enemy with a shock skill, you become charged and take 25% less damage for 5 seconds. So built in 25% damage reduction. Clutch. While charged, critical strikes have a 10% chance to cause the damage to arc as lightning damage to another nearby enemy, or if there are no other targets, you hit the target again for 250% damage. We already talked about it a bunch at the beginning, but just to show you guys the enchantments as part of the skills, we are running Ice Blades, or the cooldown reduction loop we discussed at the beginning, and then we're also running Enchanted Lightning Spear, and this is going to give us a bunch of free Lightning Spears from all the Crackling energy we're grabbing, and both those things are going to synergize super well with Conjuration Mastery, and we're going to have a bunch of Ice Blades and a bunch of Lightning Spears up once we're spooled up, and that's going to make this multiplier of mana regen really, really good. Boom! Alright, hitting the Paragon board, last big chunk here. I'm a big fan of this board I've put together. I've spent a lot of time looking at this and changing stuff and trying to tune it. I've messed with the glyphs a lot, so I've tried a bunch of different glyphs in a bunch of different spots, like testing configurations, and this is like the best I've gotten it to feel so far. So what we're going to be doing is looking at 7 boards, 7 glyphs, 2 legendary nodes. And we kind of got this split pathing where we come up to our 3rd board, do a little dip here to our 4th board, and then come up for 4, 5, and 6, or for 5, 6, and 7. So let's just start at the beginning. We're going through our non-physical path. We're going up, and we are basically just trying to get as much value as we can out of Enchanter, and that's going to be huge in scaling our Frigid Fate up to 60%. And so we can see if I take that out, I'm missing 7% multiplier, and it's even going to put me like a little beyond cap, but not only are you going to get over 100% non-physical damage in your additive bucket, since that's giving you basically 100% damage with cold, you are going to get 20% of that 100 to go to this. So that's literally giving you, if it wasn't capped, that would be giving me like 20%. Enchanter, really good at scaling Frigid Fate. I love Enchanter anyways. I pretty much have always run Enchanter here and level it up first. I just think the value of this early power, and sometimes it's worth switching it out late, but in situations like this where you needed to max out Frigid Fate and stuff, it's still really good. We're basically trying to go on this efficient int path to scoop as much int as we can while also getting to this int and this non-physical node here. Then we are pushing up and into our enchantment board. Again, one of my favorite boards. Really love it in this configuration, just like this. This is going to give you huge non-physical scaling, especially early when you're leveling. But for the end game luck, we're optimizing a bit, we got to pull some points out of here to get to our last glyph node and stuff. We're missing one of the 3 non-physical, but we still have 2 big ones. So again, like you got 34% from that one, 20% from that one, extra elite damage up here. This glyph, we are going with Elementalist. Elementalist really good for this slot if you are using all 3 elements in your build and you're looking for that extra multiplier. And the way it fits here, you just get this nice little boost to non-physical and resistance because of the way these rare nodes are. And so because Elementalist boosts non-physical damage, like this is like the perfect board and spot for Elementalist. So we're just going with the most efficient int path, which is just like this, up grabbing this non-physical over to Static Surge. And this is the one I mentioned earlier where it's basically going to give you give your Chain Lightning the ability to restore a bit of mana and give you vulnerable. And we made it so it's only an extra, the way we're pathing, it's only an extra 5 points to get there. So I don't think it's the craziest legendary, but I think with this build, it's definitely good and helps. And so we're grabbing it. So we're coming up here to the stun damage, pathing down to grab that. Coming over here, pathing down, getting all this juice. And we're mainly just focused on grabbing all this dex. Because they changed it where, see how, so before it only scaled with every 5 decks, like in intervals. So if you had, like in this example, so you have 39 out of 25 decks, that 39 would be the same as if I had 35. And it wouldn't jump again till I got to 40. But they changed it where it scales with every number now. So you can see this plus 5 dex gives me 20% crit strike damage. This plus 7 dex gives me significantly more, 28% crit strike damage. So it's actually worth trying to path to these bigger nodes if you can, if it's like efficient enough to make it work. And so, you know, we're grabbing this big dex and putting destruction here and grabbing basically as much dex as we can. But this is, again, like a really efficient dex path through this board. You get all this juice and a little extra int along the way, and you can kind of path right through it. Destruction there. Then we are coming down. Oh, this is the other thing I missed. So remember how we were talking about the mana scaling earlier? This is the other thing that's going to get you to 200 mana that I forgot to mention. So you're coming down here and you're going to get 4, 8, and 4. So that's going to put you at 16 mana, right? And then you're getting an extra 3 from Devastation, and that adds up to my 119 base mana that you saw when I was out earlier doing the gear, or the elixirs. And then when I pop that, when I run out of town, it activates my pants. And then when I pop that resource elixir, we're at 200 mana, literally just from this and from this. So super important to path through here, get all that mana. Then we are coming down and sneaking this vulnerable damage with vulnerable damage reduction, coming down and getting charged here. And this is literally just for the multiplier, because we're just going to get free 15% damage multiplier because we're grabbing so much crackling energy, always going to be active. We don't care at all about the crackling energy damage bonus that we're getting at the top of this, but we need the 40 in to bring it online. So don't ever put more than 40 in into charged. Just come down, do this efficient int path, and you can come through, get this extra vulnerable damage here, and then over to Frigid Fate. And this is our most important legendary node. This is going to give us a 60% multiplier. to vulnerable enemies. We're going to have close to 100% vulnerable uptime between Chain Lightning and Ice Blades. And so super good node there. And so we're going to stop the path there and come back up and path out of the top of our Static Surge board now. So that's board 4. You want to do this 4th and then move up out of here, make this board 5, and this is Burning Instinct. Burning Instinct, in my opinion, has one of the best corners to path through. It's pretty efficient for doing an int glyph, which is what we're doing. It's super efficient doing a dex glyph. You can save 2 points pathing through here, getting just 25 dex, and it's just a beautiful corner board. And if you have any sort of burning in your build, you can just go 1, 2, 3 and get a bunch of extra damage reduction from burning. I really like this corner. And the other thing that's clutch is same thing. You can spend a couple extra points to path up here and get a huge amount of extra damage reduction, like basically for free. It's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like 8 extra points is going to give you what? That's like 7%, 13. That's like 20. You're getting like 24% damage reduction right here, which is giant. So highly recommend just coming up here, snagging that, and then throw in Unleash in here. I mentioned this earlier, but I was running Tactician here because that's kind of like, you know, staple Sorcerer glyph and just overall good if you're running any defensives, and the dex path's really efficient. But I decided to try Unleash because I was using it originally in the leveling build for the mana regeneration, and it's literally, we're spending so much mana that even though it's only active for 3 seconds, it's going to be active all the time. We are easily churning through 50 mana every 3 seconds, and we're still going to get an 8% multiplier. So we're only losing 2% multiplier from Tactician, but we're getting the mana generation with it, and we need 2 more points to bring it online to get the int, but feels like a really good trade-off to me. The way Unleash stacks with the resource generation from our pants and the elixir I was talking about earlier just feels really good in my opinion. All right, so coming over to our 6th board, which is Ceaseless Conduit. Again, another corner board, just going for this super efficient dex pathing just to get 25 dex and bring Exploit online. Exploit, another staple of the Sorcerer glyph catalog. It's worth mentioning, guys, that sadly, our Crackling energy damage doesn't do shit. Like, that's not where our damage is coming from. And I wish it was. I wish our Crackling energy actually did something. But even with this, it feels terrible. So, yeah, I don't recommend. It takes a lot of points to get up and around here, too. So, even though you're like, hey, we're running Crackling energy build, why are we not running Ceaseless Conduit? I don't think it does shit. You could try it if you want, but you're going to have to pull something significant, potentially this last glyph away, and I don't think that's worth. So coming down into our final board, which is Elemental Summoner, and I really like ending my boards with this board, because if you orient it like this, where you're entering where this non-physical is, if you run a will glyph here, you can run other stuff, like you can get away with an int glyph for a couple more points, but specifically Elemental Summoner with a will glyph as your ending board is like such an efficient path, because you can literally just go down, down, straight down, and then go 1, 2, and 3, and you're online with your will glyph. And you don't have, there's not that many boards that like have good spots to activate a will glyph. So if I'm going to use a will glyph, I like to try to end my board pathing on Elemental Summoner and socket something like this in here, reinforced, and this is just going to give us, this is the only one that's not giving us damage. So we have 6 damage glyphs, 5 are multipliers. The only one that's not is Enchanter, but that's giving us 110% non-physical and is giving us a multiplier on Frigid Fate, so technically is a multiplier. The only one we're running for defensive is this 7th one, and this is going to give us 15% damage reduction while we have an active barrier, which is basically 100% of the time. So another 15% damage reduction to add to our defensive stack. Boom. Easy. So that's Paragon board. Hope that made sense. So super fast overview, starting with Enchanter, going up to Enchantment Master, throwing Elementalist in here, coming over to Static Surge for 3rd board, Destruction slotted in there, down to Frigid Fate board with Charge slotted in here, up to Burning Instinct board with Unleash here, and then over into Ceaseless Conduit just to path through and get Exploit, then down to Elemental Summoner, grabbing Reinforced and this extra non-physical. Boom. That is it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this looks like a build that you might have some fun playing. I know I've had a ton of fun playing it. It honestly feels so good to actually have a really fun Chain Lightning build to play. I've personally really loved the way Axial Conduits like changes the effect of Chain Lightning and makes it a whole kind of new like hybrid ball lightning automatic turret thing. And the battery effect, like having to like watch your mana and shit, and like considering all that in your build has made this build like really interesting to work on, really fun to play, and really cool to see it kind of come together in Endgame. And I'm honestly really excited to eventually build my gear out to better pieces with max rolls and then masterwork all that up to 12 and really see how far I can push this thing. So that'll probably be coming in the future weeks, and that'll be sort of a side project as I'm working on other builds. So thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you. I hope you have a good time with this build if you play it. And yeah, that's all I got for this one. Be sure to stick around if you want to check out some more Sorcerer builds. But other than that, I love you. Take care of yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.